When Richard Harrison kicked his pregnant, pleading black wife out of the house, calling her a liar and an adulterer, he believed he was closing that chapter forever. That was 10 years ago. Now, as he signed the papers to sell his bankrupt mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut, he heard the deafening roar of jet engines over his property. When he saw a military F-16 fighter jet land on his private tennis court, and watched 3 identical 9-year-old boys get out behind a woman in an Air Force general's uniform, a woman whose face he never forgot, his world collapsed. But what she said next destroyed him completely. "Hello, Richard. Your sons wanted to meet their father before you lost everything." It was a cold Friday in January 2015 in Greenwich, Connecticut. Richard Harrison, 35, CEO of Harrison Capital Management, a $50 million investment fund, arrived at his 8-bedroom mansion after yet another disastrous business dinner. He had discovered that his partner was embezzling money. The scotch burned his throat, and anger clouded his mind. Naomi was waiting in the living room, pale and nervously clutching something in her trembling hands. At 28, she was still the beautiful caramel-skinned black woman he had married 5 years earlier. But that night, Richard could only see her through the filter of his growing paranoia. "Richard, we need to talk," she said uncertainly. "I'm pregnant. The doctor said it could be triplets. 3 babies." Richard let out a bitter, cruel laugh. "Pregnant? Now? We haven't made love in months, Naomi. Months where you're always distant, always on the phone, always going out." "Triplets," he said venomously. "The woman who always told me she didn't want to have children yet." The accusation of infidelity came out with a violence he had never shown before. Naomi cried and defended herself. She tried to explain that she had always been faithful, that those phone calls were doctor's appointments, that those outings were hospital tests. "Liar!" Richard shouted, throwing the crystal glass against the Italian marble wall. The glass exploded into 1,000 pieces. "We haven't made love in 3 months, and now you come and tell me you're pregnant with 3 babies? Richard, please listen to me." "Listen to what?" "More lies." He grabbed her suitcase from the closet and started throwing clothes inside. "Get out. Get out of my house. Go to the real father of these children. You're just like all the others. You only wanted my money from the beginning." But Richard was too drunk and too angry to listen. That night, he kicked her out of the house, calling her a traitor. He said his mother was right, that he should never have married a black girl with no last name, who only wanted his money. Richard's last image of his wife was her walking out the front door with a single suitcase, protecting her still imperceptible belly, tears streaming down her face, whispering between sobs, "They're your children, Richard. 3 boys. They're your children." Richard slammed the door and never looked back. He didn't know he had just destroyed the most precious thing in his life. Richard's office was almost empty now, in March 2025. 10 years had passed. At 45, he looked 65, his hair completely gray, his face marked by a decade of alcohol, his dull eyes surrounded by deep wrinkles. His company had gone bankrupt. His properties were being foreclosed on. His lawyer had just left, delivering a devastating ultimatum: "Mr. Harrison, if you don't come up with $8 million by Monday, you'll lose everything. And then there are the criminal charges for investment fraud. You could face 15 years in prison." After Naomi disappeared, Richard searched for her for months. He hired private investigators. He checked hospitals. Nothing. When reality finally hit him, that she had been telling the truth, guilt began to consume him. Alcohol became his only companion. Bad investments multiplied. Within 10 years, the empire he had built crumbled piece by piece. That's when he heard it. A deafening roar that made the window panes rattle. Richard ran to the window and his heart nearly stopped. An F-16 Fighting Falcon fighter jet was making an approach over his property. The jet landed perfectly on his grass tennis court. The cockpit opened. A figure in military flight uniform descended with precise, confident movements. When the helmet was removed, Richard felt his legs buckle. Curly hair tied in an impeccable military bun. Caramel-colored skin. Eyes he saw in his nightmares of guilt. It was Naomi. But this was not the fragile, pregnant Naomi he had sent away. This woman wore the uniform of a brigadier general in the United States Air Force. A star gleamed on her shoulder. Medals covered her chest. Aviator sunglasses reflected the sun. And behind her, climbing down from the rear seat of the fighter jet, were 3 identical boys. 9 years old. Impeccable junior cadet military uniforms. Hair cut close in military style. And all 3 had the face of Richard Harrison at age 9. The same blue-gray eyes. The same face shape. The same dimple on the chin. Perfect copies of himself. Richard ran out of the mansion, his heart pounding so hard he thought he was going to have a heart attack. "Naomi!" he shouted, but his voice came out hoarse, broken. She walked toward the house with precise military steps, the 3 boys marching in formation behind her. Her eyes were as cold as Arctic ice when she stopped 3 meters away from him. "Hello, Richard," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "Your sons wanted to meet their father before you lost everything for good." Richard looked at the 3 boys. They watched him with a mixture of curiosity and something that looked like judgment. "These," Naomi said with calculated coldness, "are your sons. Jackson, Mason, and Carter Harrison. 9 years old. Identical triplets. A medical anomaly, as you remember I tried to tell you 10 years ago." One of the boys, Jackson, the tallest by a few inches, stepped forward. "General Mom," he said formally, "is this really the man who kicked you out when you were pregnant?" "Yes, soldier," Naomi replied, keeping her eyes fixed on Richard. "This is your biological father." Richard fell to his knees on the gravel driveway, tears streaming uncontrollably. "My children! You are my children!" He reached out his trembling hands toward them, but the 3 boys took a synchronized military step backward. "Permission to speak, General Mom," said Mason, the middle one. "Granted, soldier. You don't seem very impressive for someone who abandoned us." Carter, the third, added in a low but clear voice, "General Mom said you called us a lie. Said we weren't yours." Naomi finally allowed Richard to stand up. His military posture remained rigid as she opened a leather briefcase. "Let's get straight to the point, Mr. Harrison. Your lawyers have already contacted me. I know exactly what your financial situation is. Imminent bankruptcy. Criminal proceedings. 8 million in debt. Possible imprisonment." Richard wiped his face. How do you know that?" "I have access to military intelligence resources you can't even imagine." She turned a page. "I also know that the mansion will be foreclosed on Monday. That your Manhattan apartment has already been seized. That you have exactly $47,000 in liquid assets." The 3 boys stood at attention, watching everything with disturbingly mature, analytical eyes. "Naomi, General Harrison," she corrected coldly. "You lost the right to call me by my first name 10 years ago." "General Harrison," Richard swallowed hard. "Please, let me explain. I was wrong. Terribly wrong. Quiet." The military command came out with an authority that made Richard shut his mouth instantly. "I didn't come here for your apologies. I came so your children can see the man who rejected them. And to make a business proposal." She handed Richard some documents. "I'm going to buy all your assets. The mansion, the apartment, the remaining shares of your bankrupt company. Everything. For $2 million. Richard looked at the numbers. But that's worth at least $5 million. $2 million, Naomi repeated emotionlessly. "It's enough to pay off your criminal debts and avoid prison. But not enough for you to maintain the lifestyle you had." Richard looked at his children. All 3 wore impeccable school uniforms. Perfect posture. They didn't look like normal 9-year-olds. They looked like little soldiers. What happened to you?" Richard asked Naomi, his voice breaking. "Where have you been all these years?" For the first time, a cruel smile crossed Naomi's face. "You really want to know? Then I'll tell you. Every detail. When you kicked me out pregnant that January night, I had $3,000 in my personal account. You had frozen all our joint accounts the next day. I went to my sister Keisha's house in Chicago. Do you remember Keisha? The one you called ghetto trash?" Richard lowered his head, ashamed. "I slept on her couch for 8 months. Pregnant with triplets. I worked at a laundromat until the 6th month. In the 8th month, I had complications. Severe preeclampsia. The babies were born prematurely, at 32 weeks. 3 boys, each weighing less than 2 pounds. They spent 2 months in the neonatal ICU. Tears began to roll down Richard's face. The hospital bills? $380,000. Do you know how I paid them? I sold my wedding ring, that 3-carat diamond you were so proud to buy. It brought in $45,000. The rest? Medical debt that took me 5 years to pay off. My God, Richard whispered. But you know what the best decision I ever made was? 2 weeks after the boys left the ICU, I saw an Air Force recruitment ad. I enlisted at age 29 with 3 babies. The Air Force provided me with housing, education, and daycare for the boys. And they discovered something. I had an IQ of 156 and a natural ability for military strategy. She tapped the star on her shoulder. In 10 years, Richard, I went from recruit to brigadier general. The youngest black woman to achieve that rank in Air Force history. I commanded 3 operations in the Middle East. I have a doctorate in military strategy from Yale University. I learned to fly fighter jets. I flew 47 combat missions. And I raised 3 sons who are cadets in the most competitive youth program in the country. She pointed to the F-16. So no, Richard, you didn't destroy me when you kicked me out. You set me free. The silence was overwhelming. Now, Naomi returned to her professional tone about the proposal. $2 million for your assets. You avoid prison, but you walk away with nothing. You have 48 hours to decide. And my children? Richard asked. Can I meet them? Mason stepped forward. With all due respect, sir, why would we want to meet someone who abandoned us? Jackson added, General Mom raised us on her own. You're just a stranger who shares our DNA. Carter spoke last. We only came to see what a man without honor looks like. The words of 9-year-olds cut deeper than anything Naomi could have said. Soldiers, return to the fighter, Naomi ordered. The 3 boys saluted perfectly and marched back to the F-16. Richard fell to his knees again. Please give me a chance. Not with the money. With them. With my children. Naomi looked down at him, and for the first time, Richard saw something other than coldness. He saw pity. You want a chance? Then prove it. Take my offer. Lose everything. Start from scratch. And maybe, if you show me you can be a real man without mansions and money, I'll consider letting you see your children. I accept, Richard said immediately. I accept everything. Are you sure? Because after you sign these papers, you'll be living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Hartford. You'll have to get a regular job. You'll live like a normal person. Can you handle that? Richard looked up at the F-16, where his 3 children were watching him. Yes. I'll do anything. Naomi pulled out a pen. Then sign. And pray that I decide you're worth their time. Richard signed all the documents with trembling hands. Within 15 minutes, he had transferred everything he owned. The lawyers will be in touch, Naomi said. You have until Friday to leave the mansion. She started walking back to the fighter jet, but Richard shouted, Naomi. General Harrison. Please, just tell me one thing. Did you ever love me? Really? She stopped, but didn't turn around. For a long moment, she was silent. I did. I loved you so much that it destroyed me when you kicked me out. But that woman died 10 years ago. The woman who is here now? She is made of steel forged in pain. She got into the fighter jet. The engines roared, and in less than 2 minutes, the F-16 took off, leaving Richard alone on his empty estate with nothing but tears and remorse. 6 months passed. Richard now lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in Hartford, Connecticut, 45 square meters, second-hand furniture, overlooking a parking lot. But for the first time in 10 years, Richard was sober. He worked at a local accounting firm, earning $52,000 a year. He woke up at 5:30 a.m., took the bus to work, ate lunch he had prepared himself. Every Tuesday and Thursday night, he attended Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, he went to therapy. And every weekend, he wrote letters. Letters to Jackson, Mason, and Carter. Letters he sent to the address of the military base where Naomi was stationed, not knowing if she gave them to the boys or threw them in the trash. In the letters, he told her about his new life. About how he was learning to cook. About the elderly neighbor who taught him how to fix things. About the community basketball team he had started coaching for underprivileged children. He never asked for forgiveness in the letters. He just shared his life. One rainy Tuesday in September, Richard came home from work and found an envelope under his door. Thick paper. No return address. With trembling hands, he opened it. Inside was a child's drawing. 3 stick figures in uniforms. A tall figure with a star on his shoulder. And a separate figure, on the other side of the paper, alone. At the top, in a child's handwriting, "Our family." And in the corner, isolated, "You." But underneath, in different, more careful handwriting, was written, "But Mom said families can change. Jackson." Richard hugged the drawing to his chest and cried for an hour. 3 more months passed. Richard continued his strict routine: work, therapy, AA, letters. He had lost 15 pounds. His face was starting to regain its color. In December, on Christmas Eve, he returned from work by bus in heavy snow and found something that made his heart stop. A military jeep parked in front of his building. And sitting on the front steps, wearing military coats, were his 3 sons. Richard dropped his backpack on the snow-covered ground. Jackson? Mason? Carter. The 3 boys stood up. Now 10 years old, they were taller. But they still had that military air about them. "Hi, Dad," Jackson said, the word Dad coming out with difficulty, as if it were the first time he had ever said it. "General Mom is in the car," Mason pointed out. "She said we could stay here for 2 hours. Supervised." Richard looked at the Jeep. Naomi was sitting in the driver's seat, wearing sunglasses despite the snow, clearly keeping watch. Do you want to come up?" Richard asked, his voice faltering. "It's small, but I have hot chocolate. And cookies I made myself." "It's okay," Carter interrupted with a small smile. "We want to see how you live now." The 4 of them climbed the 3 flights of stairs. Richard opened the door to the tiny apartment, suddenly embarrassed. But the boys entered with respectful curiosity. "It's small," Jackson observed. "But clean," Mason added. Carter went straight to the refrigerator, where Richard had hung something. "You kept our letters?" The entire refrigerator door was covered with the 23 drawings the boys had sent. "Every single one of them," Richard said softly. "They're my treasures." The 3 boys looked at each other. Something passed between them. "We did some research on you," Jackson said. "We found old articles from when you were a CEO. And now you work for $52,000 a year." Richard nodded. "Yes." "Why?" Jackson asked. "Why did you agree to lose everything?" Richard knelt down to be at the boys' level. "Because I realized that having you in my life, even if it's just 2 hours on Christmas Eve, is worth more than all the mansions I've ever had." "But you don't even know us," Mason pointed out logically. "How can you value us more than your old life?" "Because you're my sons," Richard replied simply. "And I spent 10 years knowing I made the biggest mistake of my life. A mistake I can't undo. But I can try to be the man you deserve as a father." Carter, always the most emotional, quickly wiped his eye. "General Mom said you've been sober for 9 months. 9 months and 12 days, Richard confirmed. "I go to meetings 3 times a week." "She also said you coach basketball for kids for free," Jackson said. "And that you study at night," Mason added. Richard realized Naomi was telling the boys about him. She was giving them updates. "Your mother is the most incredible woman I've ever known," Richard said. "She had every right to destroy me. To never let you meet me. But she's giving me a chance I don't deserve." "She said everyone deserves a chance to change," Carter said softly. "But only if the change is real. And we've decided," Mason concluded, "that we want to get to know you. But slowly. And if you disappoint us, it's over." Richard felt tears welling up. "I understand. Completely." "So," Jackson extended his hand formally, "let's start right. I'm Jackson Davis Harrison. I'm 10 years old. I like math and robotics." Richard shook his small but firm hand. "Nice to meet you, Jackson. Officially." Mason was next. Mason Alexander Harrison. I like military history and chess. Nice to meet you, Mason. Carter came last. Carter James Harrison. I like reading and writing stories. Nice to meet you, Carter. While Richard prepared hot chocolate, the boys explored the apartment. They noticed details: a framed photo of Naomi on her wedding day, a bookshelf with books on parenting, an open notebook with a list of goals: get a 2-bedroom apartment by June, increase salary to $65,000, never disappoint them or Naomi again. Carter picked up the notebook. You're really trying, Jackson said, surprised. I am. I know I can't erase the past, but I can build a different future. They sat down on the old sofa. For a few minutes, they drank in silence. Then Mason asked, "Did you really think we weren't yours?" Richard sighed deeply. Yes. And that was the stupidest, cruelest thing I've ever done. Your mother was telling the truth. I was paranoid, drunk, and angry. And I destroyed my family because of it. Do you still drink? Jackson asked directly. No. 9 months and 12 days sober. Will you drink again? Not if I can help it. I go to meetings 3 times a week to make sure. The boys looked at each other. All right, Jackson said. We'll test you. We'll ask you questions. If you answer honestly, we'll continue this process. Richard nodded. Ask your questions. Mason, why did you marry General Mama if your family didn't approve? Because I loved her. She was the smartest, funniest, most beautiful person I ever met. My family is racist. But I married her because I knew she was special. Jackson, do you still love her? Richard hesitated. Yes. But not the way I loved her before. Now I love her with respect. Admiration. Recognition that she is much better than I deserve. Carter, do you feel angry at her for making you lose everything? No, Richard said firmly. She had every right to make me pay. She was generous just to give me the chance to meet you guys. The questions continued for 40 minutes. Finally, Jackson glanced at his watch. We have 15 minutes before we have to go back. I understand, Richard said, trying to hide his disappointment. But, Mason quickly added, we passed today's test. What? You were honest, Carter explained. Even when the answers were difficult. So we'll go back. If General Mom allows it. Richard felt hope flood his chest. Really? But there are rules, Jackson said seriously. No lying. No drinking. No disappearing. If you promise something, you do it. Got it? Got it. You can trust me. This time, you can trust me. The 4 of them got out. Naomi was outside the Jeep now, leaning against the hood. Even in civilian clothes, she still had that commanding presence. How did it go? She asked the boys. He passed the test, Jackson reported. Honest answers. No excuses. Clean apartment, Mason added. Our letters on the refrigerator. And he made good hot chocolate, Carter concluded with a smile. Naomi looked at Richard, assessing him. You've been consistent. 9 months sober. Stable job. Regular therapy. Impressive. I'm trying, Richard said simply. The boys want to come back, Naomi said. If I allow it, it would be once a month. 2 supervised hours. Do you agree? Yes. Of course. Anything. And you won't try to use time with them to win me back? Never. I promise. Naomi studied him for a long moment. All right. Next visit in January. The boys got into the Jeep. But before driving off, Carter rolled down the window. Merry Christmas, Dad. It was the first time one of them had called him Dad directly. Richard waved as the Jeep drove away, tears streaming freely. 2 years passed. Richard continued his transformation with discipline that would have impressed any military sergeant. The monthly visits became bi-weekly, then weekly, then entire weekends. He moved into a 2-bedroom apartment. He got a promotion. He now earned $78,000 as a financial controller. And something else happened. Naomi began to soften. The conversations about co-parenting became longer, more personal. One Friday night, after bringing the boys back, Naomi didn't leave right away. "Richard, I need to tell you something." He felt panic. "What? Something wrong?" "No. Something different. I got promoted. Major General. 2 stars." "Naomi. That's amazing. But it comes with a transfer. Washington, D.C. The Pentagon. The boys and I are moving in 2 months." Richard's heart sank. "I understand. It's an incredible opportunity for you." "Richard," Naomi touched his arm, the first physical contact in years. "I want you to come with us. Not to live together. But DC has a better economy. I can refer you for positions. And that way you be close to the boys." Richard was stunned. "You're helping me get a job. The boys love you. Over the last 2 years, you've proven that change is real. They would cry if you stayed here. So yes, I'm helping you. For our children." "I don't know what to say." "Say yes. Say you'll continue to be there for them. Because Richard, if you come and disappoint them, I will destroy you. Understand?" "I understand. And I swear I won't disappoint them." 3 months later, Richard was living in Alexandria, Virginia, 20 minutes from Naomi's apartment. He had landed a position as a senior controller, earning $95,000. The boys, now 12, were enrolled in an elite school for military children. And Richard was present for everything: soccer games, school meetings, presentations. Slowly, Richard and Naomi rebuilt something. It wasn't romance. It was partnership, mutual respect, co-parenting that gradually became friendship. One night, after Carter's soccer game, they were sitting in the stands. "Did you know they asked about us?" Naomi said suddenly. "About us how?" "If we'll ever get back together." I told them the truth. That the man who kicked me out died 12 years ago. That the man who exists now is different. Better. But that doesn't erase the past. And what did they say? Jackson said, "But General Mom, you always say people can change." Mason said, "And Dad has changed." Carter said, "Then maybe you can be a real family again." Richard felt tears welling up in his eyes. "And you? How do you feel?" Naomi was silent for a long time. "I feel like you're rebuilding trust. Brick by brick. You're almost there. Almost." "How much longer?" Richard asked quietly. "I don't know. I'll know when I feel it." Another year passed. Richard continued to prove his consistency. He was never late. He never missed an important event. He never drank. He never lied. And Naomi began to relax. She smiled more. She touched his arm casually. She invited him to family dinners. On the triplets' 13th birthday, Naomi threw a surprise party at her house, the first time Richard had ever been invited inside. The house was modest but organized with military precision. Photos of the boys covered the walls. The party was perfect. The boys, now 13-year-old teenagers, laughed with friends. Richard helped in the kitchen, talked to other parents, felt part of something, a family. When everyone left, Richard started cleaning up. "Let me do it," Naomi said. "We can do it together," Richard offered. Side by side in the kitchen, washing dishes, they worked in comfortable silence. "Richard," Naomi finally said, "I need to tell you something. I've received an offer. Promotion to Lieutenant General. 3 stars. I would be the 3rd black woman in history to achieve this rank." "Naomi, that's incredible. You deserve it. But it comes with a command in Colorado. The boys would have to change schools again." "But it's your career. You've worked your whole life." "I've already turned it down," Naomi interrupted. "What? Why?" "Because I've spent 12 years putting my career first. I've proven everything I needed to. But my boys are 13. In 5 years, they'll be going to college. I want stability for them now." She turned to face him. "And because for the last 3 years, you've been there. Every single time. And the boys have a father now. A real father. I'm not going to take that away from them. Richard felt emotion tighten his throat. You're giving up 3 stars for them? For our family, Naomi corrected. Yes. Our family, Richard repeated the words. Richard. Naomi took a step closer. 3 years ago, you accepted losing everything for a chance with your children. You showed that change is possible. And I think I'm ready to try again. Not the way we were. But something new. Stronger. Richard couldn't speak. He just looked at the woman he had loved, lost, and spent years winning back. Are you sure? He finally managed to say. The boys asked me if they could have Dad living here as a birthday present. They said you're here every day anyway. That it would be easier. Richard laughed through his tears. They've always been practical. So what do you say? Do you want to live here? As a family? With clear rules, separate bedrooms, rebuilding slowly, couples therapy, and if you ever go back to who you were. Never, Richard promised. That man is dead. Buried. And he's never coming back. Naomi nodded. Then yes. Let's try. From the couch, 3 voices shouted in unison, finally. The boys hadn't been asleep. They'd been listening to everything. Jackson walked into the kitchen. It took long enough. Seriously, Mason agreed. We've been waiting for this for like a year. Carter smiled. Welcome officially to the family, Dad. 5 years later, in 2033, the Harrison family was gathered at the triplets' high school graduation ceremony. Jackson had been accepted to MIT with a full scholarship for aerospace engineering. Mason was going to West Point, following in his mother's military footsteps. Carter had won a creative writing scholarship to Columbia University. Richard, now 50, sat next to Naomi, 43, their hands intertwined, something rebuilt over 5 years of couples therapy, intentional dates, and building new trust. We did it, Naomi whispered as the boys received their diplomas. You did it, Richard corrected. You raised them alone for years. I just helped with the last few chapters. No. We did it. Together. That night, at the graduation party, Richard asked for everyone's attention. I want to make a toast. 18 years ago, I made the worst mistake of my life. I pushed away the woman I loved and 3 children I didn't even know existed. The boys, now 18-year-old young men, tall, confident, ready for the world, listened intently. I spent 10 years lost. Then 3 more proving that change was possible. And the last 5 rebuilding the family. I destroyed myself. You had every right to destroy me, he looked at Naomi. To never let me meet them. But you gave me a chance. Not because I deserved it. But because you believed that people can change. And these 3, he looked at his children, taught me that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing to build something new on the ruins of what was broken. Jackson raised his glass. To the father who could have given up, but chose to fight. Mason, to the mother who showed us that strength is forgiving without forgetting. Carter, and to the family who proved that love can survive anything. To the family, they all toasted together. After the guests left, Richard and Naomi sat in the backyard under the stars. You know, Naomi said, I never told you the whole story? Why I came back that day with the fighter jet. Why I didn't just let you sink. Richard waited. Because Carter asked me. He was 9 years old. He asked, Mom, is our dad a bad man? And I realized. I didn't know the answer. You had done a terrible thing. But did that make you bad forever? So I came back to find out. To give the boys a chance to decide. And you surprised us all. You saved my life, Richard said. Literally. I'd be dead or in prison. No. You saved your own life by making the right choices after I gave you the opportunity. Naomi, can I ask you something? Do you love me? Now? Or is it just for the boys? Naomi thought. When I fell in love with you 23 years ago, I loved a charming, successful man. When you kicked me out, that love died. But over the last 8 years, I fell in love again. With a different man. A humble man. A hard worker. A man who puts his family before his ego. So yes. I love you. But not the you from 23 years ago. I love the you of today. Richard kissed her forehead. I'm the luckiest man in the world. Not luck. Choices. You chose to change. You chose to fight. You chose to be better. And in that house, built on a foundation of forgiveness and redemption, two survivors finally found peace. If this story touched your heart, like it. If you believe in second chances, subscribe. Share it with those who need to believe in redemption. Comment, "Family forever," if you also believe that love can survive anything.